The gunshot that echoed through the Montana mountain pass sent Olivia Fletcher's horse rearing, and she tumbled backward into the rocky stream below, her carpetbag splitting open and scattering everything she owned across the churning water. The cold hit her first, then the panic as the current dragged her downstream toward rapids she could hear roaring ahead. Her heavy traveling dress pulled her down, waterlogged wool becoming an anchor around her legs. She kicked frantically, gasping as her head went under again, her lungs burning. This was not how she had imagined dying when she left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago, but the West had proven more unforgiving than any story she had read. Strong hands grabbed her collar and hauled her upward with such force that she broke the surface coughing and sputtering. She found herself pressed against a chest that felt like it was carved from granite, and whoever held her was moving through the water as though the current meant nothing. Within moments, she was deposited on the rocky bank, shivering violently. "Stay down," a deep voice commanded, and through her wet hair plastered across her face, she glimpsed a massive figure crouching beside her, a rifle already raised toward the ridgeline where the shot had originated. His shoulders were impossibly broad beneath a worn leather jacket, and dark hair fell past his collar, dripping with the same stream water that soaked them both. Another shot rang out, and her rescuer returned fire with a calm precision that suggested this was far from his first gunfight. The exchange lasted perhaps 30 seconds, though it felt like an eternity to Olivia, pressed flat against the rocks with her heart hammering against her ribs. Then silence fell, broken only by the rushing water and her chattering teeth. "He is gone," the man said, lowering his rifle. "Probably just an opportunist who saw a woman traveling alone." He turned to look at her properly for the first time, and Olivia found herself staring into eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was all hard angles and weathered tan, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was perhaps 30 years old, though life in the mountains seemed to have carved away anything soft or unnecessary. "You hurt?" "I do not think so," Olivia managed through her shivers. "Just cold and wet, very wet. My cabin is a mile up the mountain. Can you walk?" She nodded, trying to stand, but her legs trembled so badly that she nearly collapsed. Without a word, he swept her up into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. She wanted to protest, to maintain some dignity, but the truth was she doubted she could make it 10 feet, let alone a mile. "My belongings," she said weakly, looking back at the scattered contents of her bag being swept downstream. "Already gone. I will provide what you need." His tone left no room for argument. As he carried her up a narrow trail that wound between towering pines, Olivia studied his profile. His jaw was set with determination, muscles in his arms flexing beneath his jacket with each step. She should have felt afraid, alone with this stranger in the wilderness, but instead she felt oddly safe. "I am Olivia Fletcher," she said finally, "from Philadelphia." "Xander Vale," he replied without breaking stride. "And you are a long way from Philadelphia, Miss Fletcher." "It is Mrs. Fletcher, actually," she said, and saw something flicker across his expression. "Or it was, I am a widow." He nodded once but did not press for details, for which she was grateful. The story of how Thomas Fletcher had drunk himself to death 2 years into their marriage, leaving her with nothing but debts and shame, was not one she enjoyed telling. His family had made it clear she was not welcome in their home afterward, and the small inheritance from her own parents had been barely enough to pay what Thomas owed. Coming west had been her last desperate hope for a fresh start. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a fairy tale, though a rough and masculine one. It was solidly built of thick logs, with a stone chimney already sending a thin trail of smoke into the afternoon sky. A covered porch wrapped around the front, and she could see a well-maintained barn and what looked like a smokehouse beyond. Xander kicked the door open and carried her inside, setting her down near a substantial fireplace where flames crackled welcomingly. The interior was sparse but clean, with a large bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and furs scattered across the floor. Animal pelts hung from the rafters, and various tools and traps lined one wall. "Get those wet clothes off before you catch your death," Xander said, moving to a trunk in the corner. "I have some things that might work temporarily." Olivia blushed. "I cannot possibly undress with you in the room." He turned to look at her, one eyebrow raised. "I just pulled you out of a river and carried you a mile up a mountain. Your modesty, while admirable, is going to get you killed if you are not careful out here." But he tossed her what looked like one of his shirts and a pair of trousers, then moved toward the door. "I will check your horse." "5 minutes, Miss Fletcher. Then I am coming back in whether you are decent or not, because I need to make sure you are not injured." The door closed firmly behind him, and Olivia hurried to peel off her sodden dress, chemise, and undergarments. Her fingers fumbled with the fastenings, numb from cold. Xander's shirt swallowed her, hanging nearly to her knees, but it was blessedly dry and still warm from the trunk. The trousers were impossible, far too large, so she settled for wrapping herself in a fur blanket from the bed. True to his word, Xander returned exactly 5 minutes later. His critical gaze swept over her, checking for signs of injury with the detached efficiency of someone accustomed to doctoring himself. "No blood. That is good. Any pain when you breathe?" "No, just tired and still cold." He nodded and hung her wet clothes near the fire on a wooden drying rack, handling them with surprising care. Then he disappeared into what must be a root cellar and returned with a pot that he hung over the fire. Soon the smell of venison stew filled the cabin. "You did not answer my earlier question," he said as he worked, adding vegetables to the pot. "What is a widow from Philadelphia doing traveling alone through Montana territory?" Olivia pulled the fur tighter around herself. "I came to Madisonville, or rather, I was trying to reach Madisonville. I have been hired as a schoolteacher there. They sent funds for travel, and I was following the directions they provided, but I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere." "You took several wrong turns," Xander said dryly. "Madisonville is 40 miles east of here." "You headed straight into the mountains instead." Her heart sank. "The man who gave me directions in the last town said to follow the river north. He either had no idea what he was talking about, or he meant you harm. These mountains are no place for anyone unprepared." He ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and handed her one along with a spoon. "Eat. You need warmth from the inside out." The stew was surprisingly good, rich and hearty, and Olivia realized she had not eaten since early morning. They ate in silence for several minutes before she worked up the courage to ask, "How long have you lived up here alone?" 8 years, Xander said. "I came west after the war, tried town living for a while, but it did not suit me. Too many people, too much noise, too many bad memories. Up here it is just me and the mountains." "The war," she repeated softly. "You fought," his jaw tightened. "I did what needed doing. Lost friends, saw things no man should see. The mountains do not judge, and they do not ask questions about what happened before." Olivia understood that kind of running, the need to escape a past that clung like shadows. "I am sorry," she said, "for what you endured." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in those storm-gray eyes. "And I am sorry for whatever drove you to risk everything coming out here alone." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Then Xander stood abruptly, gathering their empty bowls. "You will sleep in the bed tonight. I will take the furs by the fire. Tomorrow, if the weather holds, I will take you to Madisonville." "I cannot take your bed," Olivia protested. "You can and you will. I have slept in far worse places than my own floor." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. As darkness fell outside, Xander moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency, banking the fire to last through the night, checking that the door was properly barred, cleaning his rifle with practiced hands. Olivia watched from the bed, tucked beneath heavy blankets that smelled of pine and wood smoke. She should have felt awkward, spending the night in a strange man's cabin, but instead she felt safer than she had in months. "Why did you save me?" she asked into the comfortable silence. Xander paused in his work, his large hands stilling on the rifle. "What kind of question is that? You do not know me. You have no obligation to help me. Yet you risked your life jumping into that river, and now you are giving up your bed and planning to take me 40 miles tomorrow. Why?" He set the rifle aside and moved closer, settling onto the edge of the bed. In the firelight, his face was all shadows and sharp angles, but his eyes were surprisingly gentle. "Because 8 years ago, I was half dead from fever and a crow woman found me and nursed me back to health. She did not have to. I was nothing to her. But she did it anyway, because that is what decent people do when they can help someone." He reached out and tucked a strand of her drying hair behind her ear, the gesture oddly tender from such a large, rough man. "You needed help. I could provide it." "It is that simple. Thank you," Olivia whispered. "I know those words are not enough, but thank you. Get some sleep, Miss Fletcher. We have a long ride tomorrow." But sleep did not come easily. Olivia lay awake listening to Xander's steady breathing from his place by the fire, watching the play of shadows on the log ceiling. Her mind kept returning to the moment he had pulled her from the water, the strength in his arms, the absolute certainty in his movements. She had been married to Thomas for 2 years, but he had never made her feel protected. He had been weak where Xander was strong, selfish where Xander seemed generous, cowardly where Xander was brave. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You barely know this man. He is helping you reach Madisonville, nothing more. Do not start weaving foolish fantasies just because he has kind eyes and saved your life." But her heart, it seemed, had ideas of its own. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the cabin's single window. Olivia woke to find Xander already up, making coffee over a rebuilt fire. Her dress hung on the drying rack, still damp but wearable. He had thoughtfully turned his back while she dressed, though she caught him glancing over once, quickly looking away when their eyes met. Breakfast was coffee, biscuits that had clearly been made days ago but were still edible, and dried venison. As they ate, Xander laid out the plan. "We will ride together on my horse. Yours bolted when the shooting started, probably halfway back to wherever you bought him by now. It will take most of the day to reach Madisonville, and we need to leave soon to make it before dark." "I have no way to repay you for all this," Olivia said helplessly. "I had a little money in my bag, but it is gone now, washed away with everything else." "I do not want your money," Xander said firmly. "Consider it settled." They set out within the hour, Olivia seated in front of Xander on a massive roan gelding that looked strong enough to carry 3 people comfortably. Her back was pressed against his chest, his arms on either side of her holding the reins, and she tried very hard not to think about how solid and warm he felt behind her, or how his scent of leather and pine and honest sweat was oddly appealing. The trail down from the mountains was steep and treacherous in places, but Xander navigated it with ease, the horse responding to the slightest pressure from his legs. They talked as they rode, the conversation flowing more easily than Olivia had expected. She told him about Philadelphia, about the busy streets and tall buildings, and her father's bookshop, where she had spent her childhood buried in stories. He told her about the mountains, about tracking deer through fresh snow and watching eagles hunt, and the particular silence that came with a winter sunrise. "You ever get lonely?" she asked as they paused to water the horse at a stream. Xander considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, but lonely is better than the wrong kind of company. I learned that the hard way. There was someone, before you came to the mountains." His jaw tightened. "There was. A woman in Denver. I thought we would marry, build a life. Then she decided a broken soldier with nightmares and no prospects was not what she wanted after all. She married a banker instead." He shrugged. "Maybe she made the right choice. I was not fit company for anyone back then." "She was a fool," Olivia said with sudden vehemence. "If she could not see past your scars to the good man beneath, then she did not deserve you." He turned to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You do not know me well enough to make that judgment, Miss Fletcher. I know you risked your life for a stranger. I know you are kind and honorable and strong. I know you could have taken advantage of my helpless position last night, but instead you gave up your bed and treated me with nothing but respect." She met his eyes steadily. "I know enough." Something shifted in the air between them, a crackling tension like lightning before a storm. Xander took a step closer, his hand rising to cup her cheek. "Olivia," he said, her name rough on his tongue. Then reality crashed back. He dropped his hand and stepped away, his expression closing off. "We should keep moving." They rode in silence for the next hour, but it was a different kind of silence now, charged and heavy. Olivia's mind spun. She was being foolish, she knew. She had only known this man for less than a day. She was on her way to start a new life in Madisonville, to teach children and build something stable and respectable. Getting involved with a mountain man who lived alone in the wilderness was the last thing she should want. But her heart kept insisting otherwise, beating faster every time his arm brushed against hers, warming every time she remembered the tender way he had tucked her hair behind her ear. They stopped for a brief lunch of dried meat and hard bread, eating while the horse grazed. Xander seemed lost in thought, his brow furrowed. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Fletcher, Olivia, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "Madisonville is not what you probably think it is. It is a rough town, growing fast because of the mines nearby. There are more saloons than churches, more gamblers than honest merchants. The men outnumber women 20 to 1, maybe more. You show up there, young and pretty and alone, you are going to have trouble. Lots of it." Olivia lifted her chin. "I can handle myself. I did not come this far to turn back because things might be difficult. I am not saying turn back. I am saying be careful, very careful." He hesitated, then added, "And if you ever need help, if things get too rough, my cabin is always open to you. You can find your way back or ask anyone in town how to reach Xander Vale's place. They will know." "Why would you offer that?" she asked softly. "Why would you care what happens to me after today?" He met her eyes, and in that moment she saw raw honesty there, stripped of all pretense. "Because in one day, you have made me feel less alone than I have in 8 years. Because when I look at you, I see someone brave enough to chase a new life despite being afraid. Because you called me a good man, and no one has said that to me since before the war." He stood abruptly, busying himself with the horse's saddle. "And because if something happened to you and I could have prevented it, I would never forgive myself." Olivia rose and walked to him, placing her hand on his arm. He went very still. "Xander, I feel it too. Whatever this is between us, I feel it. But I need to at least try to make this teaching position work. I gave my word and I used their money to travel out here." "I know," he said quietly. "I am not asking you for anything, Olivia. I am just making sure you know you have options if you need them." They reached Madisonville as the sun was setting, painting the ramshackle buildings in shades of gold and orange. It was exactly as Xander had described, a rough collection of false-fronted stores, saloons with tinny piano music spilling out into the dusty street, and hastily constructed buildings that looked like a strong wind might blow them over. Men far outnumbered women, and Olivia could feel their eyes following her as Xander guided his horse down the main street. The schoolhouse was easy to find, a small but sturdy building at the edge of town with a bell tower and actual glass windows. Next to it stood a neat little cabin, presumably the teacher's residence. Xander helped Olivia down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. A woman emerged from the cabin, middle-aged and stern-looking, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "You must be Mrs. Fletcher. We expected you 3 days ago." "I had some trouble on the road," Olivia said. "I got lost and then there was an incident. Mr. Vale here helped me." The woman's eyes flicked to Xander with obvious disapproval. "Yes, we know Mr. Vale. He comes down from his mountain once a month for supplies and otherwise keeps to himself." Her tone suggested this was probably for the best. "I am Mrs. Harriet Grayson. My husband is the minister here. We were instrumental in establishing this school. I will show you your quarters." Xander touched his hat. "I should go. I need to get supplies before the mercantile closes." "Wait," Olivia said, grabbing his hand without thinking. "Will you be in town tonight? I usually camp outside town and head back early morning. Would you consider staying? Just so I know there is at least one friendly face nearby while I settle in." Mrs. Grayson made a disapproving sound. "Mrs. Fletcher, it is hardly appropriate for a schoolteacher to be seen spending time with a man like Mr. Vale. People will talk." "A man like me," Xander repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "And what kind of man is that exactly, Mrs. Grayson?" The older woman flushed. "I simply meant that you live alone in the wilderness, Mr. Vale. It suggests a certain, shall we say, unsociability. Mrs. Fletcher needs to establish herself as a respectable member of this community." "Mrs. Grayson," Olivia said, her voice cold, "Mr. Vale saved my life yesterday. He has been nothing but kind and honorable to me. If the people of this town judge me for showing gratitude to the man who kept me from drowning in a river, then perhaps I have made a mistake in coming here." Xander's expression shifted, something warm lighting in his eyes as he looked at her. "It is all right, Olivia. Mrs. Grayson is probably right about people talking. I will head out." "No," Olivia said firmly. "I have been making decisions based on what other people think I should do for too long. It never made me happy and it never worked out well. Stay, Xander, please. At least have dinner with me once I am settled." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I will be at the saloon if you need me, the Lucky Miner, right at the end of the street." After he left, Mrs. Grayson spent the next hour showing Olivia the schoolhouse and the small but comfortable teacher's cabin. It had a bedroom, a sitting room, and a tiny kitchen, all furnished simply but adequately. The entire time, Mrs. Grayson lectured about proper behavior, community standards, and the importance of setting a good example for the children. Finally, Olivia could take no more. "Mrs. Grayson, I appreciate your concern, but I am a grown woman who has been married and widowed. I think I understand propriety well enough. What I need right now is to wash up, eat something, and rest. Could we continue this conversation tomorrow?" Mrs. Grayson sniffed disapprovingly but finally left. Alone at last, Olivia sank into a chair and let out a long breath. What was she doing? She had a perfectly good position here, a chance to build a respectable life, and she was risking it all for a man she barely knew. But even as doubt gnawed at her, she found herself changing into the spare dress Mrs. Grayson had provided, tidying her hair and walking down the dusty street toward the Lucky Miner saloon as the last light faded from the sky. The saloon was loud and crowded, thick with smoke and the smell of whiskey. Conversation died as she entered, every eye turning toward her. Olivia kept her chin high and scanned the room until she spotted Xander at a corner table, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. His eyes met hers across the crowded room, and he stood immediately. "Olivia, you should not be in here," he said as she reached his table. "I told you I wanted to have dinner with you. I keep my word." She sat down, ignoring the whispers and stares around them. A slow smile spread across Xander's face. "You are something else, you know that, so I have been told. Usually not as a compliment." She glanced around. "Does this place serve actual food or just liquor? The stew is not bad, and the bread is fresh today." He signaled the barkeep, who brought over 2 bowls and a loaf of bread, all the while eyeing Olivia with open curiosity. They ate and talked, the noise of the saloon fading into background as they lost themselves in conversation. Xander told her about his childhood in Kentucky, about learning to hunt and track from his father, about joining up to fight when the war came and watching his world tear itself apart. Olivia told him about life in Philadelphia, about her brief, unhappy marriage, about the shame of being a young widow with no money and fewer prospects. "Teaching was the only respectable option left to me," she said. "And even then, no schools in Philadelphia would hire me. Too much scandal attached to my name. But out here, no one knows about Thomas drinking himself to death or his family cutting me off. I can start fresh." "You want to start fresh?" Xander asked, his eyes intense. "Or do you want something more?" Her breath caught. "What are you asking me, Xander?" "I am asking if you are set on staying in Madisonville, teaching school and living the life people like Mrs. Grayson think you should live. Or if maybe, just maybe, there is something else you might want instead. And what would that something else be?" He reached across the table, taking her hand in his much larger one. "I have 160 acres up in those mountains. Good land with water rights, timber, game. I built that cabin with my own hands, and I have been living there alone because I convinced myself that was what I wanted. But then I pulled you out of that river and I carried you to my home, and I watched you sleep in my bed, and I realized something." He paused, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I do not want to be alone anymore, not if there is a chance you might consider sharing that life with me." Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Xander, we have known each other for 2 days. I know, and if you tell me it is too fast, too sudden, I will respect that. I will ride back to my mountain tomorrow, and you will teach your school, and maybe in a few months when I come to town for supplies, we will see each other again. Maybe this feeling will fade, and we will realize it was just the drama of the situation making us feel things that were not real." He squeezed her hand gently. "Or maybe we will realize we let something special slip away because we were too afraid to take a chance on it." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "I am terrified," she whispered. "I made one bad choice in a marriage already. What if I am making another?" "I cannot promise you I am the right choice," Xander said honestly. "I have demons from the war. I am set in my ways from living alone. I probably snore, and I know I am not good at talking about feelings. But I can promise you this: I will never raise a hand to you. I will never take a drink and let it turn me into someone else. I will work hard every day to give us a good life. And I will spend the rest of my days making sure you never regret taking a chance on me." She looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity there. This man who had saved her life, who had been nothing but kind and honorable, who was offering her everything he had. A life in the mountains would be hard, certainly harder than teaching school in town. But it would be hers, lived on her own terms with a man who made her heart race and her spirit soar. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "This is too big a decision to make in a crowded saloon after 2 days." Xander nodded, though she saw disappointment flicker across his face. "I understand. I will be camping at the north edge of town tonight, leaving at first light. If you decide you want to take that chance, you know where to find me." They finished their meal in silence, the easy conversation from earlier replaced by tension and uncertainty. Xander walked her back to her cabin, the streets quieter now as the night deepened. At her door, he paused. "Thank you for dinner," he said formally, "and for defending me to Mrs. Grayson earlier. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Olivia said, "because it was the right thing to do." He smiled faintly. "See, that is exactly why I am falling in love with you, Olivia Fletcher. You do the right thing even when it is hard." He touched his hat. "Good night." "Xander, wait." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, feeling the scratch of his stubble against her lips. "Thank you for saving my life, and for seeing something in me worth asking to share yours." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her properly. Then he stepped back, the moment broken. "Good night, Olivia." She watched him walk away, his broad shoulders disappearing into the darkness, and then went inside her cabin. The bed was soft, the room comfortable, but she could not settle. She paced, made tea she did not drink, and tried to think logically about her options. Stay in Madisonville, teach school, live a safe and respectable life. It was what she had planned, what she had used her last bit of money to achieve. Mrs. Grayson and people like her would approve. She would be secure, independent, beholden to no man. Or go with Xander to his mountain, to a life that would be harder physically but richer in ways she was only beginning to understand. Risk her heart again on a man she barely knew, trust that this feeling between them was real and lasting. The smart choice was obvious. The safe choice was clear. But Olivia had learned the hard way that smart and safe did not always lead to happiness. She thought about Thomas, about their brief courtship and quick marriage. She had been 19, and he had been handsome and charming and from a good family. On paper, he had been perfect. In reality, he had been weak and selfish, turning to drink when life got hard, leaving her to deal with the consequences. She had tried to love him, had worked hard at being a good wife, but in the end, it had not mattered. He had died alone in an alley, and she had been left to pick up the pieces. Xander was nothing like Thomas. He was strong where Thomas had been weak, honest where Thomas had lied, brave where Thomas had been cowardly. But was that enough? Was 2 days enough to know someone well enough to bind your life to theirs? Then she remembered something her father had told her once, years ago when she was still a girl full of romantic dreams. "Olivia," he had said, "someday you will meet someone who makes your soul wake up. When that happens, do not let fear talk you out of it. Real connection is too rare to waste." Her soul had definitely woken up when Xander Vale pulled her from that river. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Olivia made her decision. She dressed quickly, packed her few belongings into the carpetbag Mrs. Grayson had provided, and wrote a hasty note explaining that she had reconsidered the teaching position and would not be staying in Madisonville. She left it on the table, knowing it would cause a scandal, knowing Mrs. Grayson would have strong opinions about her character. She no longer cared. The town was still asleep as she hurried through the streets toward the north edge where Xander had said he would camp. Her heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and terror. What if he had already left? What if he had changed his mind in the night? What if this was the biggest mistake of her life? She found him breaking camp as the sun crested the mountains, golden light spilling across the landscape. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, and his eyes widened as he saw her approach with her bag. Olivia. She dropped the bag and walked straight into his arms, which closed around her immediately. Yes, she said against his chest. Yes to your 160 acres. Yes to your cabin. Yes to you, Xander Vale. I want to take that chance. He pulled back just far enough to see her face, his expression full of wonder. You are sure? You are giving up a lot. I am not giving up anything that matters. I am choosing something I want instead of something that is expected of me. I am choosing you. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. I am choosing us. Then he was kissing her, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses she had exchanged with Thomas. This was fire and passion and promise all wrapped together. His hands were in her hair, hers clutching at his jacket, and the world narrowed to just this moment, this man, this feeling of absolute rightness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander pressed his forehead to hers. I am going to make you so happy, Olivia. I swear it. Just love me, she said. That is all I need. That is the easiest promise I have ever made. They rode out of Madisonville together as the town began to wake, Olivia once again seated in front of Xander on his horse, but this time heading toward a future they would build together. As they climbed back into the mountains, following the same trail they had descended the day before, Olivia felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was right. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it. What happens when we get to your cabin? She asked as they paused to rest the horse. Well, first I am going to make you the best breakfast you have ever eaten. Then we are going to sit down and talk about practical things, like what we need from town before winter sets in, and how we are going to manage the property together. And then, he said, pulling her closer, I am going to kiss you again because I have been thinking about nothing else for the last hour. Olivia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. That sounds like an excellent plan. There is one more thing, Xander said, suddenly serious. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I want you to have this. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes widening as she realized what it was. Xander, this is the deed to your property. Our property now, he corrected. I want your name on it. I want you to know that you are not dependent on me, that you have security no matter what happens. This land is yours as much as mine. Tears filled Olivia's eyes. Thomas had never shared anything with her, had kept control of every penny, every decision. And here was Xander, whom she had known for only 3 days, offering her equal ownership of everything he had built. I do not know what to say, she whispered. Say you will marry me. Properly with a minister and everything legal. We will go back to Madisonville in a few weeks, find Reverend Grayson and make this official. He took her hands in his. I know we are doing this backward, living together before we are married, but I do not care what people think. I just care about making sure you are protected. Yes, Olivia said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I will marry you, Xander Vale, and I do not care what order we do things in either. He kissed her again, tender and sweet this time, a seal on their promises. Then he tucked the deed carefully into her bag. Keep that safe, it is important. Xander, I cannot take your land. What if things do not work out between us? They will work out, he said with absolute certainty. But if I am wrong, if somehow this goes badly, I want you to have the security of land you own outright. You can sell it, build on it, whatever you need. I never want you to be in the position you were in with your first husband, dependent and trapped. Olivia pressed her face against his chest, overwhelmed by his generosity and thoughtfulness. How are you real? She murmured. I ask myself the same thing about you every time I look at you. They reached the cabin in the early afternoon. Xander gave her a proper tour this time, showing her the root cellar stocked with preserved vegetables and smoked meat, the barn where he kept his horse and a milk cow she had not noticed before, the small forge where he did basic metalwork, and the stream that provided fresh water year-round. "It is not fancy," he said, almost apologetically, "but it is solid. The cabin will keep us warm through the winter, we have good water, and the hunting is excellent." "It is perfect," Olivia said honestly. She could see the life they would build here, could imagine tending a garden, learning to preserve food, maybe even raising children someday. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with excitement. That night, they ate dinner together at his small table, talking and planning late into the evening. Xander told her about the work that would need to be done before winter, the wood that needed chopping, the supplies they would need to lay in. Olivia told him about her skills, about managing a household, about basic medicine her mother had taught her, about her love of reading and learning. "I am going to teach you to shoot," Xander said firmly, "and to hunt and trap. You need to know how to survive up here on your own, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case I get hurt or sick, or have to go somewhere and leave you alone for a few days. I need to know you can protect and provide for yourself." His expression was serious. "The mountains are beautiful, Olivia, but they are also dangerous. You need to be prepared." She nodded, understanding the practicality of it. This was not Philadelphia, where she could call for help if she needed it. Up here, they were truly alone, dependent only on each other and their own skills. As the fire burned low, Xander banked it for the night and turned to her. "You take the bed again. I will sleep by the fire." "Xander, we are engaged to be married. We have already established that we are not particularly concerned with propriety. Could we not share the bed? I promise to stay on my side." He laughed, a rich sound that warmed her more than the fire. "Olivia, I am trying to be honorable here. If you get into that bed with me, I am not sure I can keep my hands to myself." She walked to him, placing her hands on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. "Then do not," she said softly. "I am yours, Xander, completely. We will make it legal in a few weeks, but in my heart we are already married." His control snapped. He swept her up into his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down gently. "Are you certain? We can wait if you want to." "I am certain," Olivia said, reaching up to pull him down to her. "I have never been more certain of anything." What followed was tender and passionate, awkward and perfect, nothing like her experiences with Thomas and everything she had dreamed intimacy could be. Xander was gentle with her, patient, making sure she felt cherished and desired. And when they finally lay tangled together afterward, both breathing hard, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I know it is fast, and maybe I should not say it yet, but I do. I love you, Xander." His arms tightened around her. "I love you too. From the moment I pulled you from that river, I think some part of me has loved you." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls, the mountains standing silent guard around their little cabin. The next weeks passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Xander taught Olivia to shoot, first with a pistol and then with a rifle. She proved to be a quick study, her hands steady and her aim improving rapidly with practice. He showed her how to read tracks in the dirt, how to move quietly through the forest, how to field dress game. In turn, Olivia brought order to his bachelor existence. She organized his supplies, mended his clothes, added touches to the cabin that made it feel more like a home. She hung curtains she sewed from spare fabric, arranged wildflowers in an old jar, and made the bed with care each morning. They worked together to prepare for winter, chopping cords of firewood and stacking them neatly under the porch roof, preserving vegetables from the garden Xander had planted in spring, smoking meat and fish. It was hard physical labor, and Olivia went to bed exhausted most nights, but it was satisfying in a way her life in Philadelphia had never been. She also learned about Xander's past in bits and pieces. He had nightmares sometimes, waking gasping and disoriented, and she would hold him until his breathing steadied and the fear left his eyes. He told her about battles fought and friends lost, about the weight of taking lives even when it was necessary, about coming home to find that the world had moved on without him and there was no place he fit anymore. "You fit here," Olivia told him one night after a particularly bad dream. "With me. You fit perfectly. You saved me," he said quietly. "Just as surely as I saved you from that river, I was drowning too, just in a different way." As autumn painted the mountains in brilliant golds and reds, they prepared to go back to Madisonville to be married. Xander wanted to do it right, to make sure there would be no question about the legality of their union or Olivia's claim to the property. The return to town caused exactly the stir Olivia had expected. Mrs. Grayson was scandalized to see her with Xander, living openly as his intended, and she made her disapproval loudly known. But Reverend Grayson, a kinder man than his wife, agreed to marry them. "I will not pretend to understand young people these days," he said with a slight smile. "But I can see you care for each other, and that matters more than following every social nicety." They were married on a crisp October morning in the small church, with a handful of witnesses, including the mercantile owner and his wife, who had gotten to know Xander over the years and spoke well of him. Olivia wore a simple dress of deep blue that they had purchased from the general store, and Xander wore his best shirt and trousers, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. As they spoke their vows, Olivia looked into Xander's storm-gray eyes and felt nothing but certainty. This was right. This was real. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. When Reverend Grayson pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed her with such tenderness that several of the watching women sighed with obvious envy. Even Mrs. Grayson looked slightly mollified. After the ceremony, they bought the last supplies they would need before winter truly set in, loading Xander's horse and a pack mule they had purchased with careful provisions. Flour, sugar, coffee, fabric, ammunition, and a few special treats they would save for Christmas. As they left Madisonville for the last time before spring, Olivia did not look back. Her future was ahead in those mountains, with the man riding beside her. Winter came early and hard that year. Snow began falling in earnest by mid-November, blanketing the mountains in white and sealing them into their small valley. But the cabin was warm and well supplied, and Olivia had never been happier. She learned to cook on the hearth, to manage the fire so it burned efficiently through the long nights, to melt snow for washing and drinking water when the stream froze over. Xander taught her to play cards, and she taught him to play chess using a set she carved from wood scraps, laughing at his competitive nature. They made love frequently, exploring each other's bodies with growing confidence and passion. And on Christmas morning, after exchanging modest gifts, Olivia told Xander she was fairly certain she was with child. He went very still, his hand frozen in the act of handing her a carved wooden box he had made. "A child, I think so. It is early yet, but all the signs are there." She searched his face anxiously. "Are you pleased?" In answer, he let out a whoop of joy and spun her around, careful despite his excitement. When he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "Pleased? Olivia, I am the happiest man alive. A wife who I love beyond measure and a child on the way." "I do not deserve such blessings." "You deserve every good thing," Olivia said, wiping the tears from his cheeks. "And you are going to be a wonderful father." "I am going to be a terrified father," he corrected, "but I will do my best." As winter deepened and Olivia's belly began to swell with their child, Xander became even more protective than usual. He would barely let her lift anything heavy, constantly worried about her overexerting herself. She found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she pointed out when he objected to her carrying in firewood one day. "I know, but I cannot help worrying. Women die in childbirth out here, far from doctors and help. The thought of losing you terrifies me." Olivia softened, taking his face in her hands. "I am strong, Xander, and I have been reading the medical books you brought back from town. I know what to expect, what to watch for. We will get through this together." Spring came late, the snow finally melting in April to reveal green grass and wildflowers. As Olivia's due date approached in early summer, Xander made several trips to town, consulting with the doctor there and bringing back additional supplies and instructions. Their daughter was born on a warm June night, arriving quickly and with less difficulty than Olivia had feared. Xander caught the baby with hands that shook with emotion, cutting the cord and wrapping their daughter in soft blankets before placing her in Olivia's arms. "She is perfect," Olivia whispered, studying the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the tiny fists waving in the air. "She looks like you," Xander said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank God she looks like you." They named her Rose after Olivia's mother, and she became the center of their world. Xander was besotted, spending hours just watching her sleep, holding her against his broad chest while he did chores around the cabin. Olivia nursed and cared for their daughter, marveling at how much love she felt for this tiny person. As summer turned to autumn and then winter again, their family settled into a comfortable rhythm. Rose grew strong and healthy, learning to crawl and then toddle around the cabin while her parents watched with proud eyes. Xander taught her to make animal sounds, to clap her hands, to laugh at his silly faces. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Xander told Olivia one evening as they sat together watching Rose play with wooden blocks he had carved for her. "I thought my life would be lived alone up here, and I had made peace with that. But this, having you and Rose, it is everything I never knew I needed." "I feel the same," Olivia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "When I left Philadelphia, I was just running away from a life I hated. I never imagined I would find a life I loved instead." A second child came 2 years later, a son they named Thomas, after Olivia's father, then another daughter, Alice, 2 years after that. The cabin grew crowded and loud, filled with the sounds of children playing and laughing and sometimes crying. Xander expanded it, adding a loft where the children could sleep and a proper addition for more storage. Their land prospered too. Xander proved to be a skilled trapper and hunter, and the furs he brought to Madisonville twice a year brought good money. Olivia started a vegetable garden that expanded each year, and she learned to preserve enough food to see them through even the harshest winters. They added chickens and eventually a few pigs, building up their small homestead into something truly sustainable. The years passed in a blur of hard work and deep contentment. Rose grew into a serious, thoughtful girl who loved to read and learn, devouring every book Olivia could get her hands on during trips to town. Thomas was adventurous and bold, constantly following his father around and begging to learn to hunt and trap. Alice was the wild one, climbing trees and catching frogs and keeping her parents on their toes. When Rose turned 10, Olivia began teaching all 3 children proper lessons, turning part of the cabin into a makeshift schoolroom. She taught them to read and write, arithmetic and history, everything she could remember from her own education, and more that she learned from books Xander brought back from town. "You are a fine teacher," Xander told her, watching her patiently help Thomas sound out words from a primer. Those children in Madisonville missed out when you did not stay. Those children in Madisonville are just fine with whatever teacher they found, Olivia said. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Life was not without challenges. There were hard winters when food ran low, and they had to ration carefully. There was the year a bear got into their smokehouse and destroyed half their meat supply. There was the time Thomas broke his arm falling from a tree, and Olivia had to set it herself with Xander's help, both of them nearly sick with worry until the doctor from Madisonville confirmed weeks later that she had done it correctly. But through it all, they had each other. Olivia and Xander's love only grew deeper with time, weathering every storm and emerging stronger. They still made time to be together, stealing moments alone when the children were asleep, taking walks through the forest hand in hand, talking and planning and dreaming. You ever regret it? Xander asked her one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Giving up that teaching position, choosing this life over a comfortable town existence, Olivia laughed. Not for one single moment. Xander, you gave me the deed to your property, but I gave you something much more valuable. What is that? She took his hand and placed it over her heart. The title to my heart and soul, forever. That was yours the moment you pulled me from that river, even if I did not realize it at the time. Everything good in my life started the day I met you. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. I think we saved each other, you and I. We were both drowning in different ways, and we pulled each other to safety. Then we built something beautiful together, Olivia added, gesturing toward their cabin where warm light spilled from the windows, and the sounds of their children settling down for the night drifted out. More years passed. Rose fell in love with a young man from Madisonville, a teacher himself, and married at 18 in the same little church where Olivia and Xander had exchanged vows. Thomas eventually took over most of the trapping and hunting, his skills matching and then surpassing his father's. Alice surprised everyone by becoming fascinated with medicine, and Olivia used some of their savings to send her to study with a doctor in a larger town. Xander's hair went gray, then white, though he remained strong and vital even as the years accumulated. Olivia developed lines around her eyes and silver threads in her hair, but Xander still told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family spreading out across Montana territory and beyond. Through it all, the cabin in the mountains remained their anchor. The place where their love story had truly begun, where they had built a life together from nothing, where they had raised their children and grown old together. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the homestead for a celebration. Children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the expanded cabin and spilled out onto the grounds. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and more love than one place should be able to hold. As the celebration wound down and the younger generation settled children for the night, Xander led Olivia away from the crowd, up the familiar trail to a spot where they could see the whole valley spread out below them in the moonlight. 50 years, he said, his arm around her shoulders. I still remember the day I pulled you out of that river like it was yesterday. I remember being terrified, Olivia said. Of the water, of dying, of what would happen to me. And then there you were, this impossibly strong man hauling me out like I weighed nothing. You still do not weigh much, Xander teased, and she elbowed him gently. The point is, you saved my life that day, but you did more than that. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose, a family. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. You saved me right back, Xander said seriously. I was dying up here alone, just doing it slowly. You brought me back to life, Olivia. You made me whole again. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the sounds of their family below. This mountain valley, this land they had worked together, this life they had built, it was their legacy. Not just the physical property, though that would pass down through generations, but the love they had created and nurtured and spread to everyone they touched. "You remember what you told me?" Olivia asked. "That first night at the saloon in Madisonville. I told you a lot of things that night. You told me that I had made you feel less alone than you had in 8 years, that when you looked at me, you saw someone brave enough to chase a new life. That I called you a good man when no one else had in years." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "You were right about all of it. I was brave enough to chase a new life, and I found it with you. And you are a good man, Xander Vale, the best man I have ever known." He pulled her close, and even after 50 years, her heart still raced at his touch. "I love you, Olivia Vale, today and always." "Today and always," she echoed. They made their way back down to the cabin hand in hand, the same way they had walked through life for 5 decades. Together. The seasons continued to turn, as they always do in the mountains. More winters came and went. More springs brought new life. More summers warmed the valley. More autumns painted the trees gold. Xander and Olivia grew older, moving a bit slower, needing more help from their children and grandchildren, but their love never dimmed. They still sat together on their porch watching sunsets. They still held hands across the dinner table. They still told each other, "I love you," every single night before sleep. When Xander finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, with Olivia beside him in the bed they had shared for so many years. His last words to her were the same as his first promise: "I love you." Olivia grieved deeply, but not despairingly. They had been blessed with 52 years together, had raised 3 fine children, had built a life full of love and purpose. She remained in their cabin with Thomas and his family, who had taken over the homestead. She spent her remaining years surrounded by family, tending her garden, teaching her great-grandchildren to read, and telling anyone who would listen about the mountain man who had pulled her from a river and given her the deed to his property. "And what did you give him?" her youngest great-granddaughter asked one summer afternoon as they sat together on the porch. Olivia smiled, her eyes on the mountains Xander had loved so much. "I gave him the title to my heart and soul forever. It was a trade we both profited from immeasurably." She passed in her sleep 3 years after Xander, at the age of 76. The family buried her beside him on a hillside overlooking the valley, beneath the towering pines where they had walked together so many times. 2 simple headstones marked their resting place, but their true monument was the family they had created, the land they had nurtured, and the love story they had lived. The deed to the property passed down through the generations, just as Xander had wanted, ensuring that their descendants always had a place to call home. But more valuable than any legal document was the example they had set, of courage to take chances, of kindness to strangers, of building something beautiful from nothing but love and determination. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the Montana mountains, you can almost see them there. A strong man with storm-gray eyes and a woman with determination in her step, walking hand in hand through the trees they planted, checking on the family that grew from the choice they made to save each other. It was never about the land, though that was important. It was never about security or practicality, though those mattered too. It was about 2 souls recognizing each other across the chaos of life, about having the courage to reach for something real when it appeared, about building a life based on love instead of fear. Olivia Fletcher had come west looking for a fresh start and found so much more. Xander Vale had lived alone thinking that was his fate, and discovered he was wrong. Together, they proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the chances we take, the strangers who become family, and the split-second decisions that change everything. Their story became legend in those mountains, passed down through generations. The tale of how the mountain man gave her the deed to his property, and she gave him the title to her heart and soul forever, living proof that true love exists, and that home is not a place but a person. The cabin still stands, maintained by the family, a testament to what two people can build when they work together. The land still provides, fertile and rich, tended by hands that carry the blood of both Xander and Olivia. And their love story continues to inspire anyone who hears it, a reminder that life's greatest treasures often come disguised as risks, that the person who saves your life might also save your soul, and that forever is not just a promise but a choice you make every single day. In the end, they had everything that mattered. They had each other, they had family, they had a life built on love and trust and mutual respect. They had faced hardship and celebrated joy, survived winters and welcomed springs, grown old together with grace and gratitude. They had taken a chance on each other when logic said they should not, and that chance had paid dividends beyond anything either could have imagined. Their story ends not with sadness but with satisfaction, not with loss but with legacy. Because love like theirs does not die, it multiplies, spreading through generations like ripples on water. Every child raised in that cabin, every couple who draws strength from their example, every person who hears their story and decides to take a chance on love, they are all living proof that what Olivia and Xander built together was more than just a life. It was a lasting monument to what two people can achieve when they give each other everything. The mountain man gave her the deed to his property, ensuring she would always have security and a place to call home. She gave him the title to her heart and soul forever, offering him the one thing his money could not buy and his strength could not take, her complete and willing love. It was an exchange that enriched them both beyond measure, a trade made in trust and sealed with a lifetime of devotion. And somewhere in those Montana mountains, if you listen carefully on a quiet evening, you might still hear the echo of their laughter, the sound of their voices sharing dreams and stories, the whisper of their love that outlasted everything else and became eternal not through some miracle, but through the simple act of choosing each other every single day for more than half a century.